Believe it or not, you guys, the holiday season is upon us. I mean, can you guys believe we're already at the end of 2024? With that being said, I know a lot of you guys, especially you little weirdos out there that are a lot like me and like the woo-woo and the otherworldly, you're always looking for interesting presents to buy people. Or maybe you have a little weirdo in your life and you want to get them a really good Christmas present this year. Right now, MiraMate and Spooky2, two sister companies who are sponsors of this channel, are having a Black Friday sale. And if you're not familiar with MiraMate or Spooky2, these are two different companies under the same umbrella that basically use Tesla technology for alternative wellness. Now, again, there's a lot to these machines, and obviously, if that's something that's intimidating to you, don't let it be intimidating, because both Spooky2 and MiraMate have incredible customer service. People like Brad, who have been on this channel a lot, will be more than happy to sit down with you and talk you through each product so you know which product is best for you or for your loved one for the holiday season. If this is something that you would like to gift your friends or even gift yourself, if you follow the websites down below for both of these companies, and you enter my name at checkout, Bryce Watson, you get 5% off of your purchases. BRICEWATSON. Now, we also have another thing that's going on right now, that's been going on, and this is our panel, our roundtable discussion on the occult over on Gnostic TV, which is also a sponsor of this channel. As many of you know, we have an ever-growing roundtable of people who have survived the occult, born into the occult, research the occult, and there are tickets for this event. Now, this event is ongoing. It went live in October, but it is an ongoing event, and more contributors are being added. Now, if you purchase a ticket, that's it. That one purchase, you're done. You can use that ticket for every time a new person is added. Anytime there's an update to this panel, you already got your ticket. It's only a one-time purchase, one and done. However, if you have somebody in your life who's super interested in the occult, this would be a really cool Christmas present to get them a pass to be able to watch this panel. This is a huge panel of really big people who have famously survived these crazy conspiracies that we have been talking about for so many years. So that's another great Christmas idea for you guys. And if you're interested in getting a ticket, either for yourself or for a loved one, there's a link down in the description box below. Now, with that being said, before we get into the episode today, I'm going to play a brief commercial from our panel. Hello, everybody. If you are a fan of the occult, especially the darker side of the occult, if you like learning about the stuff that is done in the shadows, boy, do we have an event for you.
We want to welcome you to Tales of Survival from the Dark Side. Wow, what a lineup of speakers we have. I've had the privilege of meeting incredible survivors on my channel, Aquarius Rising Africa, over the past 4 years. And it's been an amazing journey for me to bring them over and just share with more new people sharing their stories.
Now, guys, this event is going to be held over on Gnostic TV, and
Indeed.
tickets are now on sale. They're 50% off, right, Shanti? So we have a link below. And also, if you want to watch the full trailer of the event, which cannot be shown on YouTube, you can hop over to Gnostic TV and watch that trailer as well. We're looking to release this panel live on Gnostic TV on Friday, October the 11th. At 11 a.m. Eastern time. So
tickets are 50% off, and once you've bought your ticket, you can watch as many shows as you want, and you can watch them as many times as you want. Support our survivors. They deserve to be heard, and there's nothing better, more healing for a survivor than to be told, I believe you.
So thank you, guys. If you have any questions, please make sure to ask Shanti or me down in the comment section below. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you guys over on Gnostic TV. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Esoteric Atlanta. Of course, my name is Bryce, and as promised, I'm going to tell you guys a story that I've never publicly spoken about before. And I think the reason why I'm finally comfortable talking about it is because everything has just bubbled up since the passing of Sharat Joyce. And I am going to change names in this just because. And I am going to try to keep this on YouTube. I'll load it up on Rumble too a week later, but I am going to try to keep this one on YouTube. So there are some words that I'm not going to be able to say fully. Just a couple. I think you guys are going to know when we get to the context of the story. I think you're going to know what these words are and what they mean. So before I get into this story, I just want to make it a point that evil exists everywhere. You know, no matter what demographic of people, no matter what group it is, there's always going to be evil. There's going to be evil in the yoga world. There's going to be evil in the Tai Chi world. There's going to be evil in the Reiki world. There's evil in the business world. And I think sometimes people get a little bit shocked, though, when it shows itself in spiritual communities. But it's just what it is. We're here on a polarized planet. And so there are definitely going to be people that are looking to manipulate spiritual tools for their own selfish desires. That's just how it is on planet Earth. And with that being said, I think this is also a really good story to remind everybody that when you're on a spiritual path, you've got to listen to your gut about certain teachers. Yes, and there's a fine line, right? Like you absolutely have to show your teacher respect. You absolutely need to do what your teacher is asking you to do in the Mysore room because the teacher does know what the teacher is doing. But outside of that, you don't need to lionize your teacher. You don't need to allow your teacher to control every aspect of your life. Hence why I made the video about crimes against humanity in the yoga world that's over on Rumble. Lionizing anybody is never a good thing. You bow your head to no one. And I tell my students that a lot. You bow your head to no one. The only entity you bow your head to is God. So like my teacher, my late teacher, Sharat, I adored him, but I didn't agree with everything he said. He was an Indian man, a Brahmin Indian man, and I'm a white girl from Georgia. So, of course, our lives and our cultures are different, right? But I respected him, and I know he had a respect for me too, because he learned my name pretty quickly. But like at conferences, I wouldn't sit at the front, I'd go sit in the back. I wouldn't go out of my way to like get Sharat's attention because he was my teacher, and that was that. I am ultimately responsible for me, and I've always had that perspective. But there are a lot of people in the Ashtanga world that lionize Sharat, lionize the Joyce family, and there are a lot of students that lionize the authorized teachers. We kind of spoke about that in the previous video that's over on Rumble. I'll link that link below if you missed it. And I hold authorized teachers responsible for allowing students to lionize them. Todd Roderick at AYA does a really good job about that, like not allowing people to lionize him because he is just a teacher and he's here to help you with yoga. And there's a lot about the yoga philosophy that the teacher can't teach you, right? We can go through the philosophy all day until we're blue in the face, but if you can't integrate that into your psyche, that's a you problem. That's something you can do. No one can really do the work for you. You have to do the work yourself. In that sense, you don't lionize teachers. And as I say commonly here, a teacher's job is to eventually not be needed. And people who come to my classes here in Atlanta hear me say, what that basically means is that your relationship with your teacher changes over time. So for example, I have students that are been doing this for years. So they have a certain autonomy in their practice that I don't have to worry about. Like with a beginner, I have to be on them, make sure that their alignment's okay, make sure they're not going to hurt themselves, all that kind of stuff. Got to talk them off the ledge. But with the student who's been doing this for years, they've settled into that. And so my teaching with that student actually becomes a little bit more simpler. And it's usually just like a quick direction and they know what to do and they can sink into it. So your relationship changes with your teacher, if that makes sense. So with that being said, that's kind of like, but again, you find this in every community. I'm sure there are boxing coaches that get lionized. I'm sure that there are business teachers that get lionized, right? We find this everywhere. Just as we find evil everywhere, we find lionization of leaders everywhere as well. Now, there's also this other side to the Ashtanga community that I don't know if my regular viewers are familiar with this. So in order to be a Mysore teacher, which is what I am off of camera, especially an authorized one, your physical practice has to be at a certain level. Now, with that being said, I don't believe that physical ability translates to enlightenment at all. I mean, I tell my students that all the time. I'm like, listen, there are a lot of assholes in fourth series. But the reason why the teacher's physical practice has to be at a certain level is obvious, because the teacher needs to be able to teach that to somebody else. And they have to know this is a very hard practice. Traditional yoga is not at all like you see in Vinyasa flow. It's very different, and it's very grueling. It's very intense. Maybe in another episode, I'll walk you guys through some of my injuries that I've had. And that's the thing about Ashtanga yoga. It's a 6-set series, so I'm not choreographing it. It's coming from the Yoga Karanta. And basically, Ashtanga, Iyengar, all these traditional yogas basically work off of tough love, right? So we say there are 3 teachers: the teacher, the practice, and the injury. So if you're not doing something right, like if you do something wrong 100 times, fine. 101 times, not okay. And the teacher can tell you over and over and over and over again, like, don't do it that way, or don't cheat that, you're going to get injured. But sometimes the injury has to happen for the student to learn. And that's kind of the perspective that Ashtanga takes. And definitely not a gentle parenting practice. Yeah, it's very old school that way. And even when you're injured, you still come to practice. You modify, but you still come to practice. And so usually people in the Ashtanga world are covered in bruises. I've heard teachers describe the Mysore room as a room full of muscle, which it is. It's usually a room full of muscle. Typically people in Ashtanga get very thin. We have a joke where we talk about Ashtangorexia, because people get too thin sometimes and have to be pulled aside and be like, you need to eat. So yeah, it's its own thing. And just like anything like Ashtanga that has a dogmatic approach to it, there is the propensity for cults to arise. And this is something that I'm very aware of. And as I've told you guys in the past, I've been very fortunate to have really good teachers like David Greek. And teachers really are the ones that control that. Because this is such a vulnerable practice, because we are up at 3 o'clock in the morning for Brahma Muhurta to do this extreme practice before the sun comes up. There tends to be a lot of emotions are coming up. There's a lot of changing happening. It tends to be like a perfect place for a cult to develop. And so it's up to the teacher to like stop that and to be like, I love it that you come 6 days a week, but you also have to have your life outside of, as Todd says the best at AYA, your life is not supposed to be your practice. Your practice is supposed to support your life. You're also looking at people in the Ashtanga world coming in with a lot of trauma. And they've picked this path because it's potent. It's very potent. And it can help them face their trauma. And strong teachers have to be aware of this and be able to be that sounding board for the student. Now, this doesn't mean I'm not a therapist. Right? I'm not a therapist. So when I have a student that has an emotional breakdown in my Mysore room, my job, usually what I do is if they're crying, I usually just kind of leave it. I don't draw attention to it. I let them kind of work it out for themselves. And if they stay after class and want to talk to me about it, I leave it up to them. At that point, I usually recommend a therapist. And I usually just give all the yoga advice I can. Like this practice, part of it is pulling this up so you can see it and you can face it. But the practice itself is not going to tell you how to deal with it. So that's kind of the step that you have to pick for yourself. And I do believe a lot in talk therapy. And so as a teacher, my job is to definitely listen to my students if they ask for help and then advise them the best way I can. And there are a lot of teachers that won't do that, that will not talk about, they'll try to handle it themselves. And that's just not, unless you're an authorized teacher who's also a licensed therapist, that's just not in your wheelhouse. And I hate when teachers do that. Like you need to send your students to either a healer, a licensed healer, or a therapist, because your job is to literally walk them through the yoga of it all. That's it. That's it. Right? So that kind of gives you Oh, and another thing I was gonna talk about too. Because the authorized teachers of the world have a certain level of physical ability, of athleticism in the practice, most authorized teachers have very clean practices. Um, and they live this very edgy life. So for as an authorized teacher, I definitely live a very edgy life. I'm not following the beaten path that my parents followed. We're traveling back and forth to India all the time. A lot of authorized teachers are covered in tattoos. They're just very, but it's a hard life. Being an authorized teacher is a very hard life. It takes a toll on you getting up that early in the morning, physically doing your own practice, and then physically moving bodies for 3 hours a day. It takes a toll on you. It absolutely does. But what a lot of times students perceive in an authorized teacher is this level of badassery, which I'm not saying there's not, because you definitely have to be tough to do this. But it goes back to this lionization. It's like Ashtanga is like the heavy metal of the yoga world. And so if Ashtanga is the heavy metal of the yoga world, then the teachers are kind of like the rock stars in that heavy metal world. And that's just kind of the perception that a lot of people, I've seen it with myself as well. Had students come in to take my classes from out of town, and they've never practiced with an actual authorized teacher before, and they get like stars in their eyes looking at me, and it makes me really uncomfortable, because I'm like, listen, yo, you and me, both humans. We're both humans. I'm here to help. I'm in service to you at this point, because I've done this for longer, and I'm going to try to help you not make the mistakes that I've made. Right? That's yeah, of course I have a strong practice. I wouldn't be teaching if I didn't. But that's because my practice has gotten strong because of years of work myself. So I know how to help you. I hope that makes sense, right? So within the Ashtanga world, you have, and I think you see this in a lot of yogas, where there's these like celebrity yoga people, and people like idolize them and lionize them, which is disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. But you see even more so in the Ashtanga world, because it's such a small insular world. So most of the authorized teachers, I know who most of the authorized teachers are. Even if I don't know them personally, I know of them. It's a very small world. We know to send each other students. Like if students are traveling, we know how to like, usually if like a student from AYA goes to like Paris, France or something, and says, oh, I practiced at AYA, they know who taught it. Like there's an understanding there within us. But there is that kind of rock star mentality. And I have seen a lot of teachers take advantage of this. Again, evil exists everywhere. So I hope that kind of, for the backstory, I hope that kind of gives you guys a better idea kind of culturally of what the Ashtanga world is like. Now, backstory again to this story. So there is a yoga studio here in Atlanta. I'm not even going to call it a shala, because it's not a place of learning. It's literally a studio. I'm not going to say the name of the studio, and the owner's name, I'm going to change her name. I'm going to call her Jane. Okay. Now, in Atlanta, in the state of Georgia, there are 3 authorized teachers. Myself, I'm the only female. Todd Roderick at Ashtanga Yoga Atlanta, and Sava at Mysore Atlanta. The 3 of us, and we're all 3 friends. There's 6, even though we're the 3 in Georgia, we're all but based out of Atlanta. And that's also the thing about Ashtanga Yoga. It depends on where in the world you live. But speaking from the American's perspective, most of the time, Ashtanga Yoga is only going to be profitable in a city. Again, this is a very intense form of yoga. It's a very traditional form of yoga. There's a lot of chanting involved. There's a lot of deep Hindu philosophy involved. And so in a small town, especially here in the Southeast, that's not going to go over so well. And so in order for people to be motivated to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and do this too. So usually these shalas really are only profitable in major cities. And so that's why all 3 of us are located in Atlanta, Georgia. Now, again, with that being said, there are 6 million people in Atlanta, so it's never been an issue that there are multiple of us. We're in different areas of the town. We support each other. We have some students that go back and forth between us. It's never been an issue between the authorized teachers. However, it has been an issue with this yoga studio ran by this woman who I'm calling Jane. Now, this particular woman that I'm calling Jane is not an Ashtanga teacher. Although she teaches Ashtanga and she teaches Mysore classes, she is not an Ashtanga teacher. And if you watch the people that practice with her, you can definitely tell from their practices that they are learning from a vinyasa flow teacher who is trying to teach Ashtanga. Because there's very different The way Ashtanga students do postures is very different from the Vinyasa flow world. We move our hands differently because of the mudras of the hands. And so when you get students that are coming from a Vinyasa flow teacher that's teaching Ashtanga, there's a lot you have to clean up. You kind of have to start all over again because they're not really executing the practice in its proper form. Well, this particular Jane that owns this yoga studio started off as a Vinyasa flow studio, and it was owned by another woman, a friend of mine, at Todd and mine's. And this other woman who was teaching Vinyasa flow decided she wanted to start an Ashtanga program. And so actually Todd was going over there for a while to help them. And this Jane person was studying with Todd and then ended up somehow becoming partners with the person who originally owned the studio, and then slyly and very sneakily took the studio from her. So it's a stolen studio. I mean, legally, what she did is legal, but it's not right. Just because something's legal doesn't mean it's right. What she did was awful. Well, this person, Jane, also has a reputation in Atlanta. She's burned a lot of bridges with a lot of yoga people, not just in Ashtanga, but in Vinyasa Flow. There's a lot of people who have been really hurt by her. She's big on creating smear campaigns. So if there is a teacher in the Atlanta area that's gaining popularity, or their classes are getting big, first she tries to love bomb them and get them over to her studio, and then she'll smear them, tries to take the students. She basically fishes for students instead of getting her own students. It's a crazy situation, but I think this happens in a lot of different industries. This woman is, again, she's not authorized, and I knew her for a very long time. And she plays this part that she is like the main Ashtanga teacher in Atlanta, Georgia. Like, she plays this role. She tries to keep herself this illusion that she's like the biggest and the baddest person out there. Well, my first trip to India, my very first trip, that's when the original smear campaign started on me. Now, I learned at that point, that's when I learned that she does this, that whenever a person gives the appearance of being going further than her, or perhaps being more popular than her, or perhaps just being a better teacher than her, she will immediately start to smear them and to create lies about them, trying to ruin that person's reputation, so that when they come back to Atlanta, they don't have a business. Now, at that point, it was just my first trip to India. I wasn't close to being authorized. It was just me there to practice. And it bothered me that she did this, but it didn't really bother me that much because I was so focused on my own work that I knew it was happening, but I whatever. Well, at that trip, Saba, the other authorized teacher, neither him nor I were authorized at this point, and we had been practicing together for a long time. I had been going back and forth to Philadelphia, all that kind of stuff. So Saba and I were at dinner one night, and I was like, damn, I've only got a few months in between this trip and my next trip. I'm not gonna have a chance to go to Philadelphia. I really wish I had a place. Obviously, I can't go to this yoga studio with Jane because she's trying to ruin me right now. So I really wish I had a place I could practice in the months in between my trips. And Sava looked at me and he goes, well, why don't you go to Todd at Ashtanga Yoga Atlanta? And I was like, who? I had no idea this guy was even in Atlanta. And that's because Todd is very quiet. He's very private. And Sava was like, yeah, he was an old Patabi Joy student. And I was like, wait a minute, what? Like this whole time, there's been a Patabi Joyce student in Atlanta, and I've been flying back and forth to Philadelphia because he had no social media presence. He obviously had a website, but it was an old website. He just kind of did his thing. And so I sent Todd an email from India. We corresponded. And then when I got back to Atlanta, I went to go practice with him. And the very first practice that I was in with him, first of all, I was like, damn, his adjustments are really good. Like, you can definitely tell this guy definitely was a student at Patabi Joyce. And after the very first practice, I pulled out of the parking lot and I was driving home, and he texted me and he was like, hey, I know this is kind of sudden, but I really need help in this shala. Would you like to assist? He was like, I really, you've only practiced like one day with me, but your teacher was David Garrigues, and I really think that you know what you're doing, and I just really need help, and I would love for you to assist with me in the shala. And so I was like, great. I was like, that's amazing. I would love to do that. Well, because I started assisting him, we got to know each other really, really well. I helped him set up an Instagram account for Ashtanga Yoga Atlanta. I gave him a template of a beginner course workshop that I had been working on, a 6-week like intensive that I had been working on for years. But I was never allowed to do it. This girl, Jane, at the other yoga studio always poo-pooed it and said it was too complicated for beginners, but I didn't think so. And he looked over the template and he was like, no, you should absolutely do that. I started teaching these beginner course series. They ended up selling out. I've always sold out. I had a wait list. Like AYA at that point started to really grow, really grow. And a lot of that was because Todd gave me freedom to teach and just let me go and teach. And I also helped him market himself because nobody knew he was there. So all of a sudden, AYA starts to grow and starts to become this big studio. This is our shala. It's actually a shala. And this is all in these few months between my first and second trip to India that this is happening. Well, because all of a sudden there's a presence online of this shala in Atlanta that's been here this whole time. Turns out Jane was actually a student of Todd's. All of a sudden the smear campaigns come even harder because she doesn't want people to know that he's there and that he's a legitimate student of Pattabhi Jois. It got so bad that students were getting private messages from students at this other yoga studio, basically shit talking Todd and shit talking me and basically saying terrible things about us and how they shouldn't be. I mean, literally stuff that a defamation lawsuit is made out of. It didn't affect us though, because most of these students would show it to us and be like, this isn't my experience with you guys. So we just ignored it. Todd has collected all the messages though, because, if we need him for later for a lawsuit, but it got bad. Well, then Todd and I started to date. And at that point, when we started dating, it kind of changed the dynamics of the shala. I could not assist as much anymore. I was still practicing there, but it got complicated because he couldn't be my teacher if we were dating. And so I would just go in and practice and I'd have to like call him over to adjust. It definitely got a little more complicated towards my second trip, but nonetheless, it was still fine. It wasn't, nobody else knew the complications but Todd and me, right? Like it wasn't that big of a deal. But because we started dating, I met Todd a year after he had gotten divorced. Like he had already gone through his divorce and had been divorced for a year when I met him. Well, this Jane at this yoga studio, I got all these messages from people saying that I had broken up their marriage, all this kind of stuff that was absolute. And I remember this is before we lived together. I drove to his house and like burst into tears. And I was like, I would never do this. I would never break up a marriage. Like what the, and he was like, Bryce, don't even worry about it. Like she knows the truth. The truth is, no, you didn't do this. I was already divorced for a year when I met you. And so again, tried to be water off a duck's back, And this went on for years. Like we went through this for years with this studio, just smear campaign after smear campaign after smear campaign. It was like they were waging war on us. War. And we're not the only yoga shala, again, she's done this to. She's done this to multiple people in Atlanta, multiple. We ended up going out to lunch with multiple other teachers, not just in the Ashtanga world, but in the Vinyasa flow world to talk about this. And they would tell us their stories of what this person, Jane, at this yoga studio did to them. And Jane at this, definitely in my opinion, is what we call a covert narcissist. She's not a malignant narcissist. She's a covert narcissist. So you don't really know she's doing what she's doing when she's doing it until you can see it or until you're in her line of target. And the amount of people she's done this to, I mean, I would guess close to 20, 25 people. And that's bad in the yoga world. That's bad. I don't have any issues with anybody in the yoga world except for her, right? My reputation in the yoga world is fine, except for with her. But she has like 20, 25 people that some people she's literally ended their lives. They're not their literal lives, but their career because of what she's done to them. And the malicious lies that she's created just to smear them, to take their students. She started sending students to AYA to fish for other students. So they would come practice with us. Then they'd sit in the lobby and try to like coax other students to go to the other yoga studio and start spreading rumors about Todd or me within our student body. It never worked. Like it never worked. But that's just what we were dealing with on a daily basis for many, many years. And we never said anything. We never fought back. We ignored it. We just went on with our lives. And so this is leading up to the story that I'm getting to. So that's kind of the backstory. Well, so years have gone by and I'm back in India for another trip. So I'm here for another trip in India. And this was actually the trip where I got authorized. And I didn't know I was going to get authorized. I was just there back to study with my teacher. And in this time, if anybody, when you go and do these types of things, you are so enmeshed in your own shit when you're there that you're not really, as I said with the first trip when she started it, you're not really even paying attention. Like you're so enmeshed in your own little world in India, and you're around all your friends in India that don't even know this person. So everything's just happening for you there. This stuff going over on in Atlanta is just like a little gnat. It's just, it's not even a part of your reality when you're in India. And on top of that, on top of doing your work and doing your practice and doing your stuff, like dealing with your own crap and doing your school, I was also doing my foundation, doing the helping the kids in India. My friend Mark Garreau and I were rescuing like 5 dogs at that time. So there was just a lot of extra, I just was very focused on what was happening to me. Now, another backstory about being in India. So where the Shala is located is an area called Gokulam. And this is a part of the town of Mysore. And Gokulam is like a very small little neighborhood. And it's a very wealthy neighborhood of it's the kind of the upper caste. But regardless, all the students are kind of in Gokulam. And so a lot of the businesses there, a lot of, everything there kind of revolves around the Shala that's there, KPJY at the Shala, because, they open up cafes for us. They sell, it's all kind of geared around, as most university towns are, geared around the school. And also when you're there, for most of us, like we have our cell phones, but I keep my cell phone on airplane mode because you're in a foreign country. And if you don't have it on airplane mode, you're going to have like phone bill through the roof when you get home. And so you can only really connect to your phone when you're at a Wi-Fi hotspot. So it kind of turns into like this old school way of living. Some people will go and get a SIM card for India, especially people who have kids, but a lot of us don't. We just don't. We just don't really have cell phones when we're over there. We can only really use our cell phones again when we're at our houses and can connect to Wi-Fi or at a restaurant. And it's okay because we all know where each other lives in Gokulam. We know where everybody's living. We also know everybody's kind of schedule because it's a very small group, and so we kind of know where each other are at all time. And so if I want to meet up with my friend Belinda, I know where her schedule. And so I'll just go either to her house or I'll go where I think she is. It's old school that way. And so for me at this time, and this is important as to how this story unfolds. Well, at this time, I vaguely remember there was this blog. This was back when people were blogging a lot that went around, kind of went viral. I don't think we knew what going viral meant at that time, but it kind of went viral within our little insular group in India. The 80 people that are there, right? It kind of just went viral amongst us. And this was a blog, and I did read it. I don't remember the details of the blog, but I remember the gist of it. Now, to be in India, to go to school there at KPJY, you do have to speak English. English is the main language that is spoken. Obviously, English is a big language in India because England kind of dominated India for a long time. And it's one of the most well-known international languages. So all the Europeans speak English. The Asians speak English, Sharat speaks English, and then we obviously call Sanskrit in class, but conferences, everything is done in English. And so this blog, and the reason why I say this is because this blog was written in English, but I remember reading it and thinking, oh, this is a European. Because you can tell, even though they're fluent in English, you can just tell that their English is not their first language. But they've written this blog in English, and you kind of knew that they wrote it in English for a reason, that there were certain people they wanted to see this blog, including Sharat. Because Sharat speaks English, Hindi, Kannada. he speaks multiple languages, but I don't think he speaks any other European languages except for English. So obviously this girl that wrote this blog wanted Sharat to see it. Now, again, I don't know who this student was that wrote this blog, and I don't know who the authorized teacher was that she was referring to in this blog. It was a male authorized teacher, and basically the gist of the blog was that she had been groomed by this authorized teacher, this male. And what ended up happening was SA. I'll let you, if you don't know what that stands for, think about the context of what I'm saying, inappropriate relationships. And she had been basically hurt by this teacher. And that's what this blog was about. It kind of outlined her relationship and how it ended up with her being SA'd. And so this was going around like wildfire. This should never happen. Obviously, evil does happen, but this should never happen. There, you know, if you're an authorized teacher and you are intimate with somebody or your partner, like for us, he couldn't be my teacher anymore. Like there's certain boundaries that you have to have with that. But obviously this teacher did not respect her boundaries. She basically, the way the blog was set up was she was somebody who probably had lionized him, like I was talking about in the beginning. That happens a lot in Ashtanga. And when he started paying her attention, she became very susceptible to grooming at that point. And then when she got SA'd, you know, that's traumatic. And so she wrote a blog and it spread around the yoga world, and it did end up reaching Sharat. This blog ended up reaching Sharat. Now, again, this is all happening in my peripheral. Like I remember reading it and kind of talking about it, but then I had everything else going on with my foundation and rescuing dogs and, you know, my own stuff through the yoga practice that I remember thinking this girl's really brave, and I do hope Sharat sees this, and I do hope that there's some accountability from this man, but I just kind of left it at that. But then word spread that it had reached Sharat, and Sharat was very upset by this blog. Now, something about my teacher that's kind of unique to him, my late teacher, is that he's very innocent. There's a side to him that's very, very innocent. And I think he's just, you know, he himself was, I guess I could use the word groomed. He himself was groomed to be the Parm Guru his whole life. So he was kept in a very insular bubble, very protected. He was in an arranged marriage. So his cultural perspective of the world is very different from most of us. And he has an innocence about him. And I definitely think he's somebody that never assumes that this stuff is going to happen. I think he always thinks the best of people. And so when stuff like this does happen, it really affects him or affected him, you know. And so, you know, the gossip around the coconut stand was that he had seen the blog and it really, really upset him. And he was probably going to do something about it. And so it was like a couple of days later, we had in our Mysore classes, in our asana classes, we had a senior teacher. Sharat had called in a senior teacher to teach for him that day, and he and his secretary were not there. And what ended up happening was he was so upset by this blog and that an authorized teacher could do this to somebody, that he ended up running background checks on all of his authorized teachers. He spent the day, there's about 500 people, with his secretary, and basically was running background checks on every authorized teacher because he did not want this to happen. This really upset him. And the next day, there were about 20 people who had lost their authorization because something popped up on their background check. And that's all he can really do, right? It's not like he can call the police in their area. It's not like he can just make a stand and make a statement as to where the main shalas, you know, they could continue teaching without their authorization. It's, you know, but it's basically him making a stand that whatever was in their background, he was not okay with it. And this is where the main shala stands on this. So I remember, and I wasn't authorized yet. I was like a month away from being authorized. I didn't know that at that time. So none of this really concerned me anyway. And I kind of had that perspective, like, it's none of my business. Like, I don't want this happening in the Ashtanga world either, but I have no control over what's happening in Japan or in France or in California. Like So whatever's happening with all these authorized teachers losing their authorization as a result of this blog, it's none of my business. Like, I hope it works out. And the thing about Sherrod as well, because he was such an innocent guy, if you had lost your authorization, you could literally just like call him up and explain the situation, and he probably would reinstate it. Right? That's just how nice he is. So anyway, all this is happening. Again, it's happening in my peripheral. I'm not even super invested in the drama of it all because I got so much stuff going on for myself. Well, this one morning, remember how I said we don't really have our cell phones, and so people know where we are. In the mornings, I would go to a cafe called Kashi, and then in the afternoons and evenings, I'd go to the Chakra House. These are two cafes that I have terrible digestion. I'm really picky eater. So I kind of found what works for me in India, and that's kind of, I lived by that. So I was at Kashi. And so it was the morning, and I remember exactly where I was sitting. We sit on the floor with these tables. I had my back against the wall, and I had books on the table. So I must have been like studying something. So I remember the books on the table. And then I could see out the window, these big windows, one of my friends from Australia, one of my Australia peers, running up the stairs. Like, she's running in. I'm thinking, oh, great, she's going to join me for breakfast. But she runs in. She's there to find me. She sits on the table beside me, and she goes, have you seen what's going on Facebook? Now, I'm not on Facebook anymore, but at this point I was on Facebook, and I was a member of some like Ashtanga groups, but not a lot of Ashtanga groups. And she was like, have you seen what's going on Facebook? And I said, no. And she goes, oh my God, I'm so, so sorry. She goes, just know that there are people in there massively defending you. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Well, all this time, in the meantime, what was happening in Atlanta was that Jane at this yoga studio, this very, I hate using the word problematic, but definitely a covert narcissist, evil person. She had coaxed this other teacher, we'll call her Connie, who was authorized. And this teacher kind of traveled around. Like, she's kind of a nomad. Todd knew her for a while. She kind of like went around different places, and like she wasn't, she was in South America. And I think Jane at this yoga studio had this grand scheme that she was going to coax Connie to come to Atlanta and teach at her yoga studio so she could really try to put us out of business. Like, that was going to be her move. Now, I knew that this was going on, that she had brought this woman into Atlanta. I didn't care though. Like, that was never anything I even worried about. AYA, Ashtanga Yoga Atlanta, is booming. It has been booming now for years. We have a waiting list for some of our classes. I'm now multiple trips into India, multiple years. I'm used to these attacks from Jane. I'm used to these smear campaigns. Like, this is nothing new to me. This is nothing new. Well, so apparently, when Sharat went and pulled a bunch of authorized teachers' authorizations, and by doing background checks as the result of this blog, he pulled Connie's, the girl that had been brought into Atlanta by Jane. He pulled her authorization. I didn't know that. Like, I had no idea who these 20 people were who had lost it. Again, it wasn't my business. And apparently, what name super am I using? Jane and Connie teamed up and decided to create these smear campaigns online pointing the fingers at me because I happened to be in India at the time that this was going on. I just happened to be in India. And so they created this whole story that I had Connie's authorization revoked. Now, this is one of the most ridiculous lies that this person has ever told. Because first of all, I'm not the person who authorizes people. I'm not the Param Guru. I never will be. It's not my decision who gets authorized and who doesn't. Equally, it's not my decision who loses their authorization and who doesn't. No person has sway. No one can walk in there and tell Sharat, hey, take that person's authorization away. No, Sharat's not going to do that just because somebody asked him to. That's not how this works. And the fact that we all in India, we all knew that a bunch of people got their authorization pulled because Sharat ran background checks. But they twisted the story to make it seem like I had gone in to remove this person's authorization, which is impossible. And it's absolutely not what happened at all. And so all these people were online, all these, my colleagues, my peers, like absolutely defending me, being like, this is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. You are lying. You are defaming someone. And if you need to project your anger onto someone because you lost your authorization, why don't you pick the phone up and actually call Sharat and see what's going on? Explain yourself, because obviously something was in your background check. Obviously that's why you lost your authorization, is because something was in your background check. We all know this. This was big news in the Ashtanga. Again, even though I wasn't super focused on it, I knew what was going on because it was happening. You know the drama in your own community. Well, it turns out that soon after that, her mugshot started to go around online because people got so upset that they'd started this rumor blaming me that people actually did a background check on her and pulled her mugshot out and put it out online. And they're like, Connie, could it be you lost your authorization because of this? Because Sharat did a background check and it looks like you got arrested for theft as an authorized teacher? And stealing isn't a part of, like, we're not supposed to steal. That's part of the yamas and niyamas, like you don't steal. Is that why you lost your authorization? And it just so happens that Sharat ran background checks on everyone because of this blog about another authorized teacher who had SA'd a student. So that's what prompted him to do this. Otherwise, if that blog had never existed, all those people probably would have kept their authorizations. So you're twisting the story, you're manipulating the story to try to make Bryce the bad guy, when she's got nothing to do with any of this. So anyway, it was crazy. And again, when I was in India, I didn't really give a shit because everybody knew the truth. And on it, but the only unfortunate thing was a lot of these pages were private Ashtanga pages. So the students in Atlanta didn't see what was happening behind the scenes. Now, our students didn't believe it. But for when I got back for a long time, there were smear campaigns still going on that I was the reason why Connie lost her authorization. I was the reason. And I wasn't. Now, about a month later, I did end up getting authorized. And the sad thing was, because all of that had happened, because it all had happened and I had been blamed for this Connie losing her authorization, I didn't even post about it. Like once I got authorized, I didn't even make a post about it because which is sad because it's such a big deal and it's such an honor to get that you want to be able to post about it in like all your years of hard work. You want to be able to say, hey, look, all my years of hard work have actually paid off. And my friend Mark Garreau, who rescues dogs with me, we actually got authorized together, which was really cool. And a lot of our friends like created a party for us and had like a cake. I got sick at that point too, so I couldn't go to the party, but they sent me a picture of the cake where they had like half of Ashtanga Yoga Atlanta's emblem and half of Mark Garreau's emblem, and it was a celebration because we were friends, we have mutual friends, and that was really sweet that the people in India did that and had a party for us, and the fact that I just couldn't even post about it, I couldn't even say anything about it because I knew that if I posted something about it on Instagram or whatever, that I was going to get such vitriol back because of this lie that Jane at this yoga studio had created with Connie. And again, they have been doing this for years. They had been attacking us for years and years and years and years and years and years. And this yoga studio in itself runs like a cult anyway. Like I consider them to be a cult. It's just crazy what they do. And as I got back to Atlanta and I was authorized myself, I continued to do stuff with Todd at AYA, but eventually Todd was like, you need to open up your own shala. Like you need your own program. You're a good teacher. And I am. That's one thing I'm very confident in myself. I am a really good teacher. I'm a really good teacher. I love this. I love teaching this. I love this philosophy. I love my students. I find all my students to be so special and unique, and doesn't mean I don't still grow and learn as a teacher. Of course, I'm still growing and learning myself, but I went off and I went up to Johns Creek. So AYA is in Inman Park, which is kind of the cool side of Atlanta. And then our friend Sava, the other authorized teacher, is over in the Sandy Springs area, which is kind of on the other side of Atlanta. I know if you're not familiar with Atlanta, they're kind of on two different sides of the city. So Johns Creek is kind of up in the north end of Atlanta. And so I would get up every morning. At this point, Todd and I lived together. So I would get up every morning and I would drive up to Johns Creek, and I started a program up there where I was the main teacher. I was the senior teacher. And it was with a new studio. And my program grew really quickly. I had some really cool people in that program, and we were just growing, growing, growing. Our MySource were getting busier and busier and busier. And I was really proud of the fact that I was now independent as a teacher. I was a senior teacher now. And I would still get people as time went by that would come to my classes, and they would practice with me for like a while, for like a month or so. And then they'd wait around after class just to talk to me. And they'd be like, I feel bad because I heard the rumors about you that were started by, that Jane, this particular yoga studio, was saying about you. And I just kind of believed it. And then, you opened up here and it's closer to my house. So I thought, oh my God, I'll just try it and see. And you're nothing like what she said you were like. And now I'm just questioning everything that this person said about you. I would get this every single day at my yoga program, where people would basically admit to the impact that this covert narcissist had on me in Atlanta. And it all worked out. It was fine. And then lockdown happened. And when lockdown happened, because the yoga studio was so new that I was teaching in, it had to shut down. It couldn't survive. And so that's when I got on YouTube. And so now my life has really changed. I still teach 2 days a week, but I do mostly stuff on YouTube. So now my teaching's going in another direction. And I do know that the owner of this studio does watch my channel, because I hear things. She steals stuff from my channel all the time, is basically what's happening. But narcissists can't create on their own, so they have to take from other people. And yeah, just the other day, it came up again about how I was the person that took Connie's authorization. And one of the students at AYA said to the person who said that, "That's such bullshit. Like, that is the biggest lie. And it doesn't even make sense. Like, it just doesn't even make sense. It doesn't make sense. I can't take any, that's Sharat's choice. That's has nothing to do with me. I can't go in there and just be like, hey, dude, that's giving me way more power than I have. It's his decision." And most of the global world knows the full story of how that went down with the original blog, which is what's pathetic about the people that practice with Jane, is that they think they're so in the Ashtanga world, but they're not, because they don't even know the full story. And everybody else in the global world knew what was going on with this particular issue with that blog. And so it does get to me every now and again. So, like, that's just not who I am as a person. And the fact that this person continuously does these smear campaigns, but and she has a strong practice herself. But even my boyfriend would say, like, when he was teaching her, like, there was like no emotion. Like, she was just he always said she just reminded him of like an empty vessel, like no personality, no emotion. And it made me think, and I said this to my therapist once, that people who excel, that move quickly into, for me, it's taken me 19 years of hard ass work to have a really clean practice. But there are people who will develop a clean practice really quickly. And I remember I said to my therapist once, I was like, I'm just wondering if those people are either really stupid or psychopaths, because the practice is designed to trigger you. It's designed to bring your emotions up, to get to force the body to almost tighten up sometimes, to deal with what's psychologically being held in a minefield, which is the body. And so people who have a soul, or who have empathy, compassion, a moral compass, will struggle. They will struggle to get to a point of having a clean practice. But in my experience, the people who just naturally have a clean practice without really trying, most of them are pure evil. And I remember I said this to my therapist, and I was like, either they have to be really stupid, like low intelligence, so they haven't intellectually conceptualized their trauma, so it's just not sticking to their body, or they're psychopaths, they don't really care anyway. And I remember my therapist goes, there's some truth to what you're saying. And I think about that a lot with Jane, because she's proven over these years to be a covert narcissist. She can't build her own business. She always has to steal from other people. She can't just let other teachers be. She's constantly having to smear someone. Someone's always in her sight of being smeared. And I just think she has no sense of self. When we know that's common with narcissists, with people who don't have souls, that they have no sense of self. So anyway, that's one of my stories, guys. I hope that made sense, especially if you're not in the Ashtanga world. Yeah, they're evil people everywhere. And even though I want to scream at the top of the rooftop sometimes for those jackasses that still believe Jane, like, are you idiots? It's not even logical. The story you're toting isn't even logical. Yeah, and I never got a chance to celebrate my authorization because I didn't want to draw attention to it because of everything that had happened. And, but to this day, karma's a bitch. To this day, AYA is so busy and there's so many great students there. And her place, she's had to like shut down and like sublet from people now because her student body is just fizzling out. Oh, I'll tell you guys a funny story too, just a little one. So Jane had been to India one time for 1 month. That was it. She'd never gone back. That was it. And I, on my first trip, was there for a long time. And one of Jane's students had messaged me on Facebook asking me, because she was interested in going, like, what is your day like? What is it like? Because she had a corporate job. And so she was trying to gauge whether it was worth it for her to go or not. And so I gave her the lowdown on like what your schedule is like, what the day is like, what everything, your first month, you're not even really going to be working with Sharat. Like there's just a lot of things because she was thinking about just going for 1 month because, and I was like, for a month, unless you're just going for the experience of being in India, your first month, you're not even going to work with Sharat. You're going to be working with an assistant because he is only going to work with people who he knows are committed to coming to him consistently year after year after year. So he's not even, so if your first month there, he's not even going to pay attention to you until your second month, if you stay for a second month. Well, apparently everything I had told her contradicted the lies that Jane had told her, so she blocked me. Because Jane had told her the 1 month that she was there, Sharat had taught her all these things and given her all, which is not true. That never happens. That never happens in India. So yeah, this person just lies, and she's so conniving and so charming that people believe her sometimes, and that's a sad thing, and that's just sad for them. I mean, they've started smear campaigns on Reddit over AY. It's just crazy. She's her flying monkeys, her students, but that's their karma to pay. That's their karma to pay. Todd and myself have never done anything to hurt anybody. We've tried to never even engage. Like this is the first time, and this has been like 10 years. This is the first time I'm even publicly speaking about this. This has just been something private. But since Sharat's passed away, I feel like, there's a lot of evil in the Ashtanga world that needs to be exposed. And just exposing it is really sometimes all you could do because you as the student have to make the choice to listen to your gut. If something feels like a cult, it's probably a cult. If something feels too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. If you're in a yoga shala where in the lobby all the owner, the main teacher is doing is gossiping with students or telling certain students certain things in order to get them to go and spread gossip, then you're probably dealing with a narcissist. That's a flying monkey. She's creating you to be a flying monkey to do her bidding. So yeah, anyway, with that being said, for those who are in the global Ashtanga world, David Grieg, my original teacher, whom I love to death, is coming back to Atlanta in 2025, in the spring of 2025. I'm not sure which month, I think maybe March. So if you are a student of Ashtanga Yoga and you want to practice with David Grieg, you can go to the website, Ashtanga Yoga Atlanta, and sign up for the workshop if you want to. It does tend to sell out. We haven't really advertised it yet. We're kind of waiting to fully, and we've already are halfway booked up. We haven't even advertised it. So if that's something you're interested in, you might want to go ahead and sign up because spots go quickly. If you do need to do like a payment plan, you can reach out to Todd at ashtangayogaatlanta@gmail.com and work out a payment plan with him, and he can go ahead and hold a spot for you. So yeah, they're great. I'm so excited. I love David. He is really one of the best teachers out there. He and Todd are tied neck and neck for being some of the best teachers that I've ever had. So yeah. All right, you guys. I'll maybe I'll tell more stories. I know you guys have heard the story about how I about that I broke my sacrum, but I haven't actually told the full story about how I broke my sacrum. You kind of alluded to it, but maybe I'll tell the full story of how I broke my sacrum in the next video, because it also has to do with another evil person in the Ashtanga world. But it always, whatever the devil makes for bad, God will use for good. So yeah, that's what's happened. And as far as the rest of this month, I didn't even realize, you guys, this month has been so crazy for me. And I thank you guys for hanging in there with me. As far as our historical deep dives, just hold for a second. I've got a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, actually having to do with yoga, to be honest with you guys. I can't really talk about it that much, but in December, mid-December, we are going to be talking about what I've been doing. I've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes. I'm super excited about it. So just hold on. The next few months, we're just going to be doing videos like this or looking at current events, all that kind of stuff. I thank you guys so much for all the positive feedback, again, I got from my Crimes Against Humanity and the yoga community video over on Rumble. I worked really hard on that, and it was 2 hours. I pulled a lot of references to like the Nuremberg laws, all sorts of stuff that I can't talk about here on the YouTube. So if you have not seen that video, please go down to Rumble, to the link on Rumble, to watch it. And that information that I shared, I shared that information because of the yoga world, but everything I shared in that information, or in that, all the information I shared in that video, feel free to use that information for your own life as well, right? Because it applies to all of us. So all the links are down there, and that's part of the reason why I started this channel, right? Was for us to share information and share research. And even though we're not focused on historical stuff for these next couple of months, just because of what's going on, with the current events, I plan on doing more current events, kind of like what I did with that yoga, where we look at laws and we look at what happened. So please, please, please feel free to take the information from that video. Again, all the links are down in the description box below over on Rumble on that page. Feel free to use those for your own community as well. And again, as I said yesterday, if there's anybody who wants to do a roundtable, whether you're jujitsu or any martial arts or tai chi or reiki or yoga, any one of the yoga communities, and you feel the same way and you want to speak out against what has happened over these last 4 years and how it spits in the face and is contradictory to spiritual practices, as I talk about in that video, just email me at esotericatlanta@gmail.com. Put your practice, whatever it is you practice, in the subject line, and I would love to have other people come on and for their voices to be heard too. So you don't have to be an authorized teacher to come on. You could be a student to come on it. That doesn't matter. We want to hear from you as well. So, all right, you guys, I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you later.